All righty. I'd like to call this special planning board meeting, January 29th, 2025, to order, please. If you would join me, stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we have an agenda before us here. Could I get a motion to approve that?
I'll make a motion to approve the agenda for January 29th, 2025.
Could I get a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Jan and Tony. We've got approval of the minutes, and we have the transcript from October 21st that I'm assuming, Wes, we would just simply vote to enter that into the record. I mean, it's extensive, it's long. I don't think it was a court reporter that did it.
Yes, sir.
And I'm going to take them on as two different.
Yeah, well, so for the October 21, 2024, that would serve as the transcript and meeting minutes from the October 21, 2024 planning board meeting.
Okay.
It was prepared by Stephanie Graham, certified court reporter. But if you look at the very last page and what was either emailed to you or hard copy given to you is a certification page from you as chairperson, assuming you all approve it tonight, stating that the attached document consisting of 265 pages is a true and accurate transcript of the October 21, 2024 Southern Shores Planning Board of Adjustment meeting, and it has been approved by the board on whichever date as the official meeting minutes of October 21, 2024.
Okay. Does anybody have any issue with approving what Wes just said for that set of minutes and transcript? I didn't comb it over for corrections. I'm assuming that she knows her business.
Yeah.
So I'll motion to approve the transcript as written and noted by Wes and enter that into the record. All in favor of that, and I need a second.
I'll second the motion.
Thank you, Tony. Any discussion? All in favor of that motion and second? Raise your hand.
Aye.
Opposed, none. Okay. The minutes for our planning board meeting, November 18, 2024, are a little more streamlined than that 5.5 hour meeting we had in October. So they're shorter. I found a couple of minor corrections. One was on line 37. Says involve having the attorney. I would say we need to put which attorney there. Got that, Wes?
Yes, sir.
You just need to identify the attorney. And let's see. On line 126, it says natural occurrence, i.e. lighting, and windstorm was capitalized. It shouldn't be a capital W there. Other than that, I didn't see anything else. Anybody find anything?
I kind of remember, and I didn't see it in here, and it could be my memory shot. But after Michael, from line 42 to 60, that was the public comments provided.
Mhm.
And they alluded a couple times, and Michelle Youngstone, that this was a tree ordinance. And if my memory serves me right, Chairman Ward, you said this is not a tree ordinance.
Well, that would be her words that,
No, I'm saying that
Yeah.
you afterwards
oh.
stated, not her words, all this, but afterwards, I kind of remember you stating, thank you, but this was not a tree ordinance. I know you say it later on in 190. I think it's 194 or something.
Yeah, I don't,
Because we wanted to emphasize that that was not a tree ordinance. You wanted to emphasize.
mhm.
Yeah,
Without going back and looking.
Here it is, 174. You advocated, Chairperson Ward expressed that he is not advocating for a strict standalone tree ordinance. And I could have, it's not that important, but I just thought it is mentioned on 174 because we wanted to emphasize that at that meeting. And I'm pretty sure you did.
Yeah, I don't recollect, after public comment saying anything after Ms. Youngstone got up.
Okay. Well, I have no problem with this then.
Okay. Anybody else have anything? Okay, if no other corrections are there, I'll get a motion to approve the minutes of November 18th, 2024.
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes of the meeting for the Planning Board of November 18th, 2024.
Thank you, Tony.
As amended, correct?
As amended.
correct, yeah. I'll second that. All in favor of motion and second, raise your hand.
Aye.
Opposed, none. Okay. All right. Public comment is next. I know we have someone interested. Would you like to do
Yeah, I hope this is
now
an
or-
appropriate time, because I'm going to speak to the ZTA.
Well, everybody got what
Now
you,
or late. You know, we have two public comment periods.
yeah,
Better to go first, and then,
up to you.
I don't know, because I wasn't sure how this was going to operate.
Yeah.
Casey is here, so I assume he's going to be speaking too.
Well, you can
Come back
certainly
later, circle
have two
back.
bites at the apple if that's what you need.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good afternoon, members of the planning board, Mr. Haskett, and the town attorney, whose name I forget. What is it?
I'm John Callow.
Hello, good afternoon. I'm Ann Scherdsma, 232 North Dogwood Trail. I did want to speak to the ZTA, which I do not support, primarily because I think it just adds to very cumbersome language, more cumbersome language. And I was around for all the discussions in 2017, 2018, 2019. I have files with me here today with the ZTAs that were floated at that time. There were numerous meetings. I know Mr. Ward remembers, Mr. Lawler probably remembers as well. But there were tremendous time was spent on revising the non-conforming lots recombination ordinance. I did not support the way it came out, which was to grant exemptions to people, and they were all identifiable people. But I also thought that the first time the ZTA was done to try to fix the ordinance, it caused harm to too many people. So I understood why we went back, in particular, Mr. Ward went back and addressed it. Things have changed. It's been 5 years now. That ordinance has been on the books. Mr. Garrison Beach has had ample time to have notice of that ordinance. And I just don't believe another exemption is the way to go with this. I do not necessarily think he should be left without some recourse, however. My view would be to enforce a recombination for lots 43 and 44, I believe, that constitute 23 Dolphin Run. That's a 15,000 square foot parcel. Most of the other lots on that street are 15,000 square feet, which is a fairly standard size for those side streets from Ocean Boulevard to Duck Road. I would say that those need to be recombined. As for the lot that's left out, and I'm running out of time already, the 45, I think that one should stand alone as a 10,500 square foot lot. And then I did have this other section of the ordinance that I sent out around a letter that I think should be addressed, that I don't think is fair for other people. And that's 36-132A2C, which I think I will address in the second public comment period. FYI, I actually have here the spreadsheet that Wes did in 2019 that shows you all of the non-conforming lots in Southern Shores and all the ones that have more than one lot, or non-conforming lots, and those that are made up of 2 or more lots. There was a lot of work done 5 years ago, and I have paperwork if anybody's interested. Thank you.
Thank you, Ann. One other person out there sitting in the front row.
No, just want to listen and
Okay,
understand.
sure, great.
I'll speak briefly. I didn't intend on it, but I may as well. So, and to Ms. Ann's comments, I think my understanding in reading through this.
Hey,
and-
Casey, can I get you to back up?
I'm sorry, Casey Varnell, Kitty Hawk, North Carolina, but obviously represents citizens within Southern Shores from time to time, and I've been in front of all you guys before, so I appreciate you indulging me. The issue certainly with Garrison's lots, when I was researching potential avenues of development, one thing at least that I felt Mr. Garrison could do is taking the 43, 44, and 45. There was a potential with the way it's currently written that my guy legally, Mr. Garrison, who I do represent, could legally build on 44 because it complied with the single lot language within the ordinance. Once he completes construction there, there's then this spare 43 lot, which now also meets the single lot requirement and could be constructed upon. It's not what he wants to do. What he actually wants to do is exactly what Miss Ann brought up. Sure, I know, I just didn't want, and I've represented you before, and I just didn't want to mess it up. But what I believe this ordinance would allow is the construction on 43 and 44 as a single development, meaning he's not building on 2 small lots. He's building one residence on 43 and 44, leaving 45 alone. And I think that's what you said you would prefer happen.
I said you recombine 43 and 44.
Okay, understood. And in my understanding of the application of this is that recombination or not, there can only be one development on. So it has the effect of recombination because you can't build 2 houses. You can't build 2 structures. But that was my reading of it. So I just thought I'd give my 2 cents. So thank you very much.
Okay, well, as we go along, you're not going anywhere, are you?
No, I'm sitting right here.
As we go along, I don't want this to get into too much back and forth. We'll ask you questions as need be, but we're going to try to move through this, and the planning board will discuss what we're trying to achieve here. And Mr. Hollow will be certainly involved, and Wes. So we'll ask you to jump in as needed, if that's
I
okay.
didn't even intend on speaking, as a matter of fact. So.
Good deal. Okay, thank you. Sure, you get up there. A little bit out of order, but we don't stand on formality around
Okay,
here.
my name's Scott Simmons, resident of Southern Shores, live at 6 Sandfiddler. I guess the question is, when I read through it, I was left with, what are we trying to achieve, right? So that's my simple question is, what are we trying to achieve with these lots on Dolphin? That's
Yeah.
my basic question.
Sure. Okay. Well, I think we'll get you an answer before I hit that hammer again. Thank you. Yeah. But no, this isn't a question and answer time going forward, but you'll have your opportunity if you want to chime in at public comment afterwards. So anyway, I would ask that before we get moving forward, if Wes, you can bring up I find it easier to use this sketch that's 7 years old. Everybody get this?
Yeah.
You got this sketch, didn't you? I don't know, you may need to rotate it if you could, Wes, when you get it.
Here we go.
Right, yeah. Okay, thank you. At this point, I'm gonna call on Wes to give us a debriefing of why we're here this evening, starting with the second paragraph in the staff report analysis.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Good evening again, Mr. Chairman and members of the board. This is ETA-2501, amendment of Town Code Section 36-132A being proposed by the town. Background: on October 16, 2024, town staff received an application from Casey Varnell, attorney for Garrison Beach LLC, to appeal a formal interpretation issued by town staff on September 16, 2024, regarding the application of Section 36-132 of the Town Code. The formal interpretation addressed a scenario in which 3 adjacent non-conforming lots on Dolphin Run, all owned by Garrison Beach LLC, may be developed without recombination. The subject properties include lots 43, 44, and 45, which are shown as 23 and 27 Dolphin Run on Dare County GIS for tax purposes. So if you look on the screen right now, this shows Dolphin Run here. This is a sketch Mr. Ward put together in 27 or 2018, I believe.
17.
Yeah. So 27 is this parcel right here. That is lot 45 by itself. One non-conforming lot, 70 feet wide, 100 feet long. That's shown as 27 Dolphin Run. 23 Dolphin Run right here is one parcel for tax purposes that consists of 2 lots, 43 and 44. They're both 50 feet wide and 100 feet long. So all 3 lots are non-conforming with respect to lot width as well as lot area. The town's formal interpretation determined that under the current version of Town Code Section 36-132A2A, Garrison Beach LLC could not legally construct a single-family dwelling and customary accessory building upon lots 43 and 44 without recombining them with lot 45 prior to development. So if I pull up the town code, Section 36-A2A, we have 36-132 here. A, non-conforming lots of record. 1 is development and sale of certain non-conforming lots without recombination. 2 is when recombination is required. And the result of the formal interpretation that was rendered in response to Mr. Varnell's request was that 36-132A2A right here prohibited developing lots 43 and 44 as a development site without combining them with 45. So let me go back to Recognizing the need to modernize the town code as directed by town council in February of 2024, and in order to avoid an appeal to Superior Court, town staff and the town attorney worked with Mr. Varnell to develop a ZTA that would establish a new exemption in section 36-132A1 that is consistent with the purpose of the town code. The proposed ZTA will permit the construction of a single-family dwelling and customary accessory building on 2 or more currently non-conforming adjacent lots as a single development site if at least one of 2 or more non-conforming adjacent lots is located to a single non-conforming lot that is under the same ownership and on which there is located an existing single-family dwelling, and the adjacent improved land is made up of no more than 2 lots, all of which are non-conforming. The proposed ZTA will also clarify that applicability of the existing exemptions to the recombination requirement referenced in section 36-132A of the town code, and further clarify the requirements for the recombination of adjacent non-conforming lots under same ownership that do not qualify for an exemption. Town staff has determined that the proposed amendments are consistent with the town's currently adopted comprehensive land use plan, and we recommend approval. So if we go to the proposed language in the ZTA 2501, let's zoom out and bring it up on the screen. I'll just go through each proposed amendment unless you'd rather proceed differently.
No, I think we can work through it.
Yes, sir. All right, so I'll just say, essentially, what this ZTA would allow is it would create another exemption. As Ms. Schurzma stated earlier, historically, or we went back and made some amendments to this ordinance in 2019 that addressed certain situations that the board and the town council recognized after making amendments in 2018 that some thought were strict.
Yeah.
So this would create a new exemption, and this exemption would allow, and this is just a scenario that we're aware of, the Mr. Garrison Beach LLC situation, 23 and 27 Dolphin Run. This would allow, we'll say 23, which consists of 43 and 44, to be developed as a single development site with a single family dwelling and customary accessory building. That would be allowed on lots 43 and 44 without having to recombine with lot 45, making this all one parcel. That is the intent. That is the goal here.
Well, let's back up just a little bit. Can you, or we can look at it, everybody's got their, the ZTA in front of them.
Mm-hmm.
If you all will look on page 3 and go to line 18, which states recombination required, item 2.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll read that. If any of the following situations apply, all adjacent lots under the same ownership shall be recombined into one, a single lot, which may or may not meet the minimum requirements for the district in which such lots are located, or 2, multiple lots, which all meet the minimum requirements for the district in which such lots are located. And A, underneath that, and Wes just alluded to that in his staff report, A says development is proposed, and this is saying that this situation, all those situations from A to E require recombination when they exist. A says development is proposed upon land which includes one or more non-conforming lots adjacent to one or more other lots under the same ownership. So my question for quite possibly Mr. Varnell first would be, why is that not in effect on this situation? And Mr. Hallow, you can
I'm-
certainly redirect or however you want to treat it. though.
Could be better directed to Mr. Holla, but I think we're on the same page that number 2 only applies if the exceptions in the foregoing ordinance number 1 do not apply.
Yeah, so the easiest way to look at this is that subsection 2 where it says recombination required. That's the general rule. So pretend subsection 1's not even on this sheet of paper. If we were just to operate under subsection 2, you're exactly right. A would apply, and it would prohibit building without recombining the properties.
Well, and I'm not advocating for that. I'm just wondering why that particular item from A to E, obviously A would be the applicable part of the equation for these 3 parcels. Why?
For what was proposed in the formal interpretation Mr. Varnell submitted, he was asking if they could develop lots 43 and 44 as a single development site
Yeah.
without recombining with 45.
And
So my job is to first thing go to A2. Does it meet any of these? Well, yes, it meets A.
Mhm.
Or does it meet any of the exemptions? In this case, it does not.
it just seems to me the strict interpretation of our ordinance would say that A says you got to recombine all 3 of them.
It does currently.
It
but
does.
What we're proposing would
Yeah,
create an
and
exemption.
I'm on board 100%. I know what the intent is, and I don't have an issue with it, but I would like an explanation of, what has occurred here to get to this point.
And I can touch on that a little bit. I mean, you can look at me and you can tell that I haven't been doing this for 7 years and wasn't here in 2017, but I've spent more time than I'd like to admit over the last couple of weeks dealing with this ordinance. And really, our goal is to make it as narrow as possible because we want to avoid any further unintended consequences. I mean, obviously, it's impossible to foresee everything that might could happen, but we feel that what we've done here is create a very narrow exception. And Mr. Varnell touched on this briefly, but when he submitted that first request for an interpretation, we looked at the ordinance. I agree with Wes that subsection 2A would apply. And Casey's original, Mr. Varnell's original question was, well, do we meet any of the exemptions in subsection A? And originally, we looked at subsection A and everything was singular. So it was a single lot. There's no reference to multiple lots. And we determined that because there was no reference to plural lots or more than one lot, trying to recombine or trying to develop on 43 and 44, you're dealing with more than one lot in that case. And we didn't have any kind of exception that covered for it in the ordinance. So after we realized that we thought we were correct, we responded to the interpretation and said, well, we think you are stuck under subsection 2A, and we don't see where you would apply for any kind of exception in subsection A. Well, then Mr. Varnell not only appealed that determination, he submitted another request for an interpretation. And he said, okay, looking back up at the big screen, what if my client wanted to build only on lot 43 first? So he went back and looked at it. We determined that, again, he's falling under that 2A category. And then we looked up at the ordinance and said, okay, well, he might actually have something here. He may be able to build on 43 on its own. 44. We didn't respond to that interpretation because at that point we had reached out to him, realized that we may have a dispute on our hands, and wanted to find some way to put this ordinance in a clear way that we could avoid litigation, avoid undue attorney's fees, and fighting this thing through Superior Court and maybe even further than that. But the second inquiry asked about building first on 44, and if he was able to meet one of the exceptions, I believe it would have been A1D1 that he might would have applied or that he might would have complied with to be able to build on 44. If he had done that, he could have then built a second structure on 43, most likely under the language of the current ordinance. Because if you look at 43, imagine that 44 is developed. They meet the exception. They develop on 44. So then we go over to 43. We're still in the same boat because we still have non-conforming lots that are adjacent to one another. But now we're not dealing with the plural lots language. We're dealing with a single lot. in A1. And under the former version of the ordinance, the language is still in this version. But if you look at A1D, the single lot is located adjacent to land under the same ownership. Well, he has that taken care of, on which is located an existing single-family dwelling. They would have had that at this point because they would have developed on it. And the adjacent land is made up of no more than 2 lots, all of which are non-conforming. In this case, the adjacent land would have been made up of 1 lot, which was non-conforming. So there's a good chance he would have qualified to build first on 43 and then secondly on 44. And I understand that the town would prefer to have lower density. And luckily, in this case, Garrison Beach would prefer to build on lots 43 and 44 together, as opposed to building 2 small structures on these even smaller lots, creating more density.
Okay, so I'm gonna stop you for a minute. A lot of words there.
I'm telling you, it is a lot.
So what we have now, if we pass this tonight, it will preclude any development of a single lot, 44 or 43. Is that correct? What you have worked on for 2 weeks is a ZTA that precludes only building on 1 lot. Because I've got some scenarios that Wes has run by you, and we're gonna work through those scenarios and probably back and forth with you some. But I want to give the rest of the board opportunity to ask questions if you.
Yeah, I have a couple things. How many other properties fall under this category?
This is the only one I'm aware of at this time.
Okay, so in effect, we're changing a ZTA for 1 property. That's what we're doing? Because we don't want to take it to court.
We're adding.
We're adding, yeah.
We'd be adding an exemption for this scenario.
Okay, just for 1 property. And so what will happen if someone 6 months from now comes up and asks for an exemption? Do we go through, are we going to do exemptions for each?
Well, I guess that's a good question. It depends on the scenario. It depends on the circumstances. And I think Mr. Vice Chairperson and Mr. Chairperson Ward, y'all will probably recall former town attorney Ben Gallup. When he wrote this language initially, he said more than once in more than one meeting that it's hard to make this perfect and we're not going to catch every situation.
Okay,
He told us, he said, you're going to have to come back and look at this again later on. And he was right. It took 5 years.
Yeah.
But
Which
it
isn't
depends
bad,
on
really.
it depends on the circumstances.
okay.
I'm gonna read out just some notes that I took down today that I want the board to be aware of, because Ed here was in on the early days when Glenn Weeder died. Ed took Glenn's spot, and we were kind of in the throes of, issues of nonconformity. And so that was I actually started on the planning board in 2018, but in August of 2018, the planning board started identifying non-conforming lot situations, and Glenn and I got together and we put out 9 pages of sketches like this. And ironically, this was one of the ones that was identified as being non-conforming, and what do we do about it? So September 2018, if you'll remember, Town Council passed a extreme ZTA that acted almost as a moratorium, and it held for a year. And we went back and forth. Town Council went back and forth for a year. It was extremely complex, like Ben Gallup said, and we were just trying to do everything we could to make it all encompassing, but we found that was really hard to do. So we finally, in 2019, a year later, and we had multiple meetings on this, Town Council passed the current ordinance, which we have before us today with this ZTA scratched in. And we had a list of exceptions that we identified at the time, and there were 5 of them. I'm not going to say the names because Ms. Schertzman certainly knows who they are, I'm sure. But there was one on Sea Oaks Trail. There was one on Ocean Boulevard that involved the heirs of a deceased person. There was another one on Ocean Boulevard. There was one on Trout Run, and there was another one on Ocean Boulevard. So that was 5 exceptions that we just felt like we need to let these people through the door. Otherwise, it's just going to be, like the Gestapo putting the hammer down and saying, we're going to follow this to the letter of the law. So that we did that, those 5 exceptions through Ben Gallup's counsel. So concerning those exceptions or carve-outs, it has been the planning board and the town's position ever since that we would strive to be fair and reasonable to accommodate non-conforming lot situations that are sure to surface moving forward. Here's an example. And we're not doing it for one property, but this is a good compromise as an exception to allow what these people are trying to do, rather than force the issue and go to court and maybe win, maybe lose. I see it more as, being a good neighbor, in good faith, letting this occur and with some assurances. And the scenarios are what I want to go over with you, Johnny, is we know that Mr. Varnell's client has said that lots 44 and 43 would be built on, and they would be built on with it being a conforming, or it would not be considered non-conforming, correct?
They'd be left considered, if he were to develop it as a single development site, they would
Recombination would not be
They
needed.
would not be required,
Right.
as the language is written, they would remain as 2 non-conforming lots
Correct.
without having to be recombined with a house and accessory structure.
So,
I have a question. If I were to build across 43 to 44, one structure, and I wasn't, required to recombine, that line then just goes away and it becomes just one single lot?
not
So
Really?
so you're saying right now, if somebody without this ZTA or with this ZTA? 'Cause we've got a,
With the CTA, because the way it's written now,
so if this ZTA is adopted the way it's written now, and someone developed 43 and 44, they would be allowed to develop it, put a house on it, and not combine the underlying lots. They would remain as is.
but they would, no, their purpose was to build across the 2 lots.
They
In
would
other
build-
words, They're
they would build a-
basically combining, but they're not combining legally.
So if you look on the screen, I mean, your setbacks, it would be treated as one development site. Your setbacks would be
Right.
15 feet from this side, 15 feet from this side, 25. So
Right.
conceptually, you'd have a house that goes across the line like this, and an accessory building somewhere.
Right. You could have a garage with a unit above it
You could.
on 44, and the house comes across and meets that garage.
The house
In other
could,
words, you've gone over. I
Yeah.
personally did this. We did not do a combination of lots. And that line just went away.
it depends on circumstances.
Right.
Like I said, every
But it can be
situation,
done that way.
it depends. It depends.
well,
Let me,
sorry, Tony.
I need clarification. I'm sitting here looking at this. And lot 45 is one tax bracket.
Yes.
Lot 44 and 43 is combined as one tax. Am I correct?
Yeah. So if I go to Dare
Well,
County.
wouldn't that in itself, an easier way to write this perhaps would be if the county looks at it as a one tax item?
I don't think they would ever do that. I can't speak for them, obviously, but I will just say, it wasn't long after I first started working with the town that I discovered that they did this. Like, if you look, like, right now, they show it on a map as one piece. But if you look at
Right.
the description on the left, it says lot 27, 28.
And if you hit lot lines, it shows.
Oh,
the
yeah,
green
if,
dot.
and if you turn on lot lines, if you took the reference,
Do they get one tax bill for that, or do they get two separate?
and then lot numbers.
I can address that particular question just because I've had many closings where this thing pops up. What happens? The owner doesn't want to get two tax bills. So the owner requests that the tax office, for the purposes of tax bills, for the purposes of tax assessments, that they be treated as one lot. So just put these two vacant lots together. If you've got a 55,000, a lot worth 55,000 here, right beside it's another 55,000 valued lot. Okay, well, now we've got $110,000 in one tax bill. So the
So,
payment
but
would
it-
be the same. It's not formalized if you go for the purposes of title to
Right.
go, you're not going to find a recombination plat.
Mm-mm.
You're not going to find a recombination agreement even that some towns, I don't know if Southern Shores has them, but will allow you to build, but you have to have this formalized agreement that says that you never will sell these or you won't do anything with these as a single lot in the future, but you won't find that. It's because the tax office is just going based off what the owner has
So
requested.
convenience for the property owner.
Absolutely
But is it only
convenience.
on vacant lots, or would it be you own a lot and then you own a lot next door? It only is on two vacant lots or.
The
four
vacant lot,
Legal on the house next door.
yeah, the vacant lot has to come into play because that's what, it's got a finite value. You're
Right.
not taking into consideration structures
Sure.
or anything of that nature. So yeah, it would not surprise me if there are some that have, a house, a vacant lot right beside there that was bought to keep space in between the owners and their neighbors that become combined for tax purposes without being formally. It wouldn't surprise me to see
Right,
that.
okay.
So if the house was built on both lots and was burned down, could the next owner, and the guy says, I'm leaving. Next owner, could he then have two lots to build on?
I'm going to point to them for that one. That's theirs.
So it runs with the land. If this ordinance were to be adopted, it would run, it runs with the land, not with the owner.
Yeah.
Not the
Okay.
person.
So he could. If you don't erase that little blue line now, you basically have two lots for the future.
No, if you erase it, it's one.
Yeah, if you
And
erase
that's
it.
what they're saying, is that we'll run with the land now.
Well, we're not erasing anything.
Right now, the way it's proposed is a house and a customary accessory building can be built if adopted in this situation, this property, across lots 43 and 44 without having to combine them or without having to combine them with 45.
Okay,
And
that's good, but like I said, if the house should burn down,
If he builds a house and it burns down,
yeah,
then he could rebuild another one. Or if
Does
it
he have
burned
two?
down, if he burned it down and it sold, he would, so if he built it and then it burned down, and then if he wanted to sell it,
you could sell two
I
lots.
mean, it probably depends on the definition of structure too, in your town code.
at the building,
Well, I'm thinking of like up in Duck, they have all these non-conforming businesses.
All right, so if he owned it and it burned down, he again would still he could still qualify to build another house on it. The situation doesn't
One
change.
house, he could do another one, could he build two?
He couldn't build two houses on both lots.
Without recombining them to
Without
45.
He would he would still be able to use this exemption to rebuild a house on 43 and 44 without recombining with 45.
The only reason that he's able potentially to build right now on 43 and 44 as separate developments is because of his co-ownership or the quality of ownership between 45, 43, and 44. So if it burnt down the 43 and 44 and he sold those two lots, they're not going to own that lot 45, then allowing them to build the two houses. That's what would bootstrap them there, in my opinion. And then they would be bound by the remainder of the ordinance, which without that, they couldn't build on 43 and 44, period.
Okay.
Mr. Chair, may I ask a question? Just one.
One time.
Can you come to the microphone?
Yeah, yeah.
As I understand this scenario, all three of these lots were held by one owner before they were purchased by Mr. Garrison, correct? If so, why was there not a recombination upon sale?
That's a good question, and I have the same question. So is that your question?
Yes,
Okay, thank you.
because that means we're not enforcing
that-
our ordinance.
That, I would like for that answered. I got it written in red pen on 2 pieces of paper, and Mr. Varnell certainly has gone down this road before in representing, property owners here in Southern Shores. And I would like first maybe for you to address that question, and then maybe Mr. Hollow to see what he's got to say. But we have an ordinance, and she's exactly right.
Well, I will say this, just as not trying to get out of the hot seat, I'm used to being in the hot seat. I didn't do the transactional side of
Right,
this
you were the
closing.
buyer's agent, right?
No, my point is my partner, Starkey Sharp, did the
Ah.
transactional side of this. I actually was not involved I didn't get the fortunate ability to meet Mr. Garrison until this issue itself arose, and then Starkey brought me in on it to assist with the zoning side of things. Now, what I would say from a legal standpoint is that it's arguably it's an enforcement nightmare for the town, but that's where the enforcement lies. In other words, the requirement of a recombination, the buyer is buying at their own risk. That's what's going on when you buy subject to zoning ordinances, just like when you buy subject to restrictive covenants. So if you've got a zoning ordinance that says you must combine in the event of the following, and the town then decides to enforce that ordinance against you, well, you took it subject to, and you're subject to whatever consequences you face. But it's not, in my mind, an affirmative requirement for it. Say it another way, it would be an anomaly for a town ordinance to bleed into a private property transaction. What occurs after, however, from an enforcement standpoint is another story. But I will say it just, and Johnny and I have spoke about this before, the enforcement, the idea of properties being sold subject to the requirement of recombination, just as a local government, it's an enforcement nightmare, as I said previously. That's a hard thing we're gonna hire somebody to monitor the MLS. I mean, it's a very difficult thing to enforce. So.
We can't, put somebody over at the courthouse and make sure that every transaction is done properly and, they recombine what needed to be recombined. But would you agree, and Mr. Hollow as well, that it is an obligation of the attorney representing the buyer and the seller to notify them of this condition in our ordinance here in Southern Shores? It seems to me that you should.
So my guess is these discussions were absolutely had prior to the purchase. And I don't want to get too deep into the arguments, even in totality here, as to the ability to tell someone that they can't build on any lot that was legally platted of record and legal at the time it was platted. Arguably, somebody could make that. But what happened here is an analysis by my partner occurred prior to closing. Analysis being that, yeah, this thing exists, but it appears that you will be able to do something with those 2 lots based on what Mr. Hallow and Wes have explained to you. So yeah, did we inform him? Sure.
Yeah,
Sure, we informed him.
It just seems like a lot of assumption when the town and an aggressive team of attorneys could make it really hard for somebody.
Sure.
And,
And if we're
I'm just-
informing them and they take the risk,
well, and
That's where
that's
it's at.
exactly what they did in this case, as
That's
far
where
as
it's
I'm
at.
concerned.
right.
I'm not willing to press the issue, and I don't think anybody else up here is willing to press the issue. We're trying to do what's right and equitable for a new neighbor in town. So, yeah, I don't think we're willing to, hold this, but it's out there, and I think reputable attorneys in Dare County that represent, clients in Southern Shores need to tell them about this daggone part of our ordinance. It's
Right.
not in there to, not be in there. It's in there to be respected. And in my opinion, it didn't get respected, but we're not going to hold it against them at this point.
I have a question for you, just a quick question
Sure.
for you. And that is one tax bill, as I discussed earlier.
Mhm.
When did that one tax bill come into effect? When the property was sold and suddenly they converted the 3 tax bills into 2? Is that when that happened?
I'm not sure. I'm not.
Because if that happened, he's acknowledging tax-wise, it's a recombination if he asked for that, in my opinion. If at the time of sale, he said, I want one tax bill, he was aware.
If that occurred, yeah, but
Yeah,
I don't.
know whether it occurred either.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, it's a hypothetical, but it's an interesting hypothetical about that.
But it's been like that through the other owner too. I mean,
What was it?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Okay. So
If
it
you look at
was.
the tax certification
It
on
was-
there, it goes,
It was set up as those 2 parcels
right.
prior to
Yeah.
change of
Yeah.
ownership.
Okay.
Robert?
I have a question about the town's ordinance that has a requirement of people that you cannot sell your property without recombination. Does the town have that authority?
You want my opinion, or do you want the town's?
just told us.
I would just like your opinion.
I think that, oh man, there's a potential for a takings claim from a constitutional standpoint, the deprivation of property rights, because you're now involving or affecting somebody's ability to sell their property in a buyer beware state. So I think there may be some issues there. Sure, there may be some issues there, but certainly not ones that what I want to focus on, just on behalf of my client speaking here today, is that we believe what is being proposed is certainly more in line with the intent of the original ordinance, as opposed to, your own attorneys explained it to you, could be very well likely that he could have went in, built on 44 and 43, complied with your ordinances, and now we have 3 homes side by side on 50-foot lots. Or we take this approach and we've got 2 of these 50-foot lots that are non-conforming combined, much bigger lot. No matter how you look at it, that's double the lot size of what he could potentially do under your current ordinance. Could he potentially make more money? I don't know. That's not my job. But could he potentially make more money building on lot 44 as a solo lot, on lot 43 as a solo lot, and then coming in and doing whatever he can, whatever the code allows, on 45 that has the existing dwelling? Now I've got 3 properties, 3 homes. Could he potentially make more money? Sure. But that's not what he wants to do. He would rather comply with, again, in the situation that he's currently in, he would rather try to meet what seems to be the intent, or further the intent of the town's current ordinance.
I really just wanted to clarify Ms. Ann asked, a question. Andy concurred, just like, how is a person allowed to sell their property? I think it's pretty clear that the selling of the property is not something that the town can control. It's on the buyer's side. It's a buyer beware state. It's definitely on the buyer's side to know the code and take the risk.
Can I just chime in and follow up on a couple of things?
Yeah.
one thing, I guess to start with the enforcement thing, it's definitely something that's hard to enforce. It reminds me of HOA covenants that prohibit rentals. And then you have somebody that moves into your neighborhood, or somebody that comes into the neighborhood, parks their car out front. They stay in the house. You don't know if it's a family member or if it's somebody that's truly renting it. If they haven't posted it anywhere online, how can you prove they're renting it? It would be an enforcement nightmare, for one thing, to stop the sale of every, or at least consider the sale of every property, because you would need somebody that, number one, is willing to go through the records to be up to date on the sales that are happening in the town. And then you'd also need somebody that would be able to look at this ordinance, look at the proposed sale, and determine whether or not the ordinance is going to be violated. So there's no doubt it's it's a difficult enforcement thing to do. As for the legality of it from that angle, that question really is not answered. As far as I know, in North Carolina, I've looked at it in the David Owens book. There's not a good answer. There may be arguments on both sides, and it may be something that the courts answer one day. But as far as I've seen in the David Owens, who lives here and is the well-known land expert in North Carolina, I haven't seen any authority on that one way or the other. But what I will say is that, even let's assume for the sake of argument that the town either practically cannot enforce practically cannot stop people from selling their properties. Assume that's a law, and this isn't even in the ordinance. That's fine, because the town still has an enforcement mechanism, and that's stopping development. So as long as you still have that way of stopping development, then the ordinance is serving its purpose, regardless of whether or not either A, you're practically able to enforce this ordinance, or B, you're legally able to enforce the ordinance.
And just to touch on what Johnny, Mr. McClendon asked for my opinion. So I just wanted to follow up. I agree with Johnny. By no means am I saying there's some piece of case law out there or some statute that says anything in your ordinance is invalid. That by no means was not what I was saying. I think it's just the enforcement side of it that's really, really difficult. But no, I'm with Johnny. I'm not aware of any piece of literature that says that it can't, or it is illegal to have that.
Let's dial forward. This thing passes tonight as written. And next month, we have the exact same situation come along. Can they build separately on those two smaller lots? The way the ordinance, if we approve it to be sent to town council, and it's on their February 4th agenda, does this ZTA preclude this exact same situation a month from now and letting them build? What you're saying, Mr. Farnell, is that there can be two houses built on 44 and 43. A month from now, this same situation comes along, and we've got this ZTA in place. It's an ordinance now. Could there be two houses built on 43 and 44? Because that's why we're here, is to preclude that, I would think. We're willing to allow the exception. But what you're saying, Casey, is that you think that two houses, the way it is right now, two houses can be built currently under the law.
Currently, but not with the adoption of
Right.
this.
That's what
I
I'm
think
asking.
this fixes that.
If it happens a month from now, which is doubtful, but we never know. If this happened a month from now, the exact same situation, what is your opinion of being able to build two houses? rather than
So
one?
are we talking about in between the time it passes from
No.
you guys to the council during that period of
The
time?
council, if they like what our recommendation is, they will pass it.
Uh-huh,
They have a public hearing February 4th, I think.
uh-huh.
Don't they, Wes?
It's set for a council public hearing February 4th.
So moving forward, so-
Would this, if you recommended approval of this, if council accepted the recommendation and went and approved this, could my guy build, or anyone in my guy's situation, which, remember, requires more than just owning two adjacent non-conforming lots. You also have to have that third lot
Well, I'm just saying.
that has an
same
existing
situation.
dwelling. I'm just pointing out for everybody.
Yeah.
Because I don't want someone to think that what this ordinance is going to allow is somebody out there who has 2 vacant lots that are non-conforming and adjacent to each other can now go in and even build one house on as a joint site. You can't.
No,
But yeah, if somebody came in under my guy's exact scenario, this would, in my opinion, prevent the building of 2 houses,
That's
one on
all.
43 and one on 44.
that's all I wanna
Absolutely.
hear. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. Everybody understand that? All right.
I think that better than I understand this.
Well, yeah. Johnny, I'm gonna get you to maybe weigh in on, I've got.
We're
some-
both kind of going back and forth on it over here, to be honest with you. We think there's a possibility that it could be precluded based on that last sentence that's added in the very end. But that limits us to A1E. If we were to look at A1D again, I'll do the analysis with you, you have the same situation come up.
Hold on,
A1D,
A1D.
line 37, I think.
What page are we on?
Line 37, page 2 of 5.
Yeah.
Everybody there?
Mm-hmm.
So we're obviously in the same situation with subsection 2A, so we have to look for an exception. And if you look down, A1, in any district in which single-family dwellings are permitted, a single-family dwelling and customary accessory building may be erected on any currently non-conforming single lot or 2 or more, which doesn't apply here because we're looking at building on 1 lot, because that's the question, right? Starting on 44.
Mhm.
If the lot met all legal requirements at the time of its creation and recording in Dare County, then if you go down to D, which is what we worked under originally, the single lot is located adjacent to land under the same ownership on which is located an existing single-family dwelling, and the adjacent land is made up of no more than 2 lots, all of which are non-conforming. So if we look at 44, it's on a single lot, it's adjacent to land under the same ownership on which is located an existing single-family dwelling, and the adjacent land is made up of no more than 2 lots, all of which are non-conforming. So I think it probably does permit it, but you also have the option not to do that, which is kind of what our goal was with this, was to expand the exception to allow for this scenario, not necessarily eliminate other scenarios that are in place. Now, I can't tell you what it would do if we deleted that exception that would allow to build on 44 first and then 43, because I don't know what other effects that would have on properties in the town.
I would just comment that part of the legislation that was adopted, the Senate bill, where you cannot downzone property, I don't think we could
Yeah, we don't
propose
want to
that
go
at this
there.
time.
Yeah.
Maybe soon, but
Yeah, and today, just as a side note, we saw today that Senator Hannick has filed legislation that would allow that, put back in place the language that used to be
Mhm.
in the statutes that would allow for downzoning if initiated by a local government
Right.
without consent.
Are y'all feeling confident that we can preclude that from happening with this, or could it possibly happen that you could build 2 houses on the 2 small lots?
I'm not confident that it couldn't happen. I think it could happen, but I think if we tried to limit it now to put us in a situation to where we could preclude that, I think we'd violate the downzoning law.
Right, okay.
I have a
Well-
question. I have a quick question.
Yeah.
So in this scenario of 43 and 44, if he sold property 45, if he sold lot 45 and came in and wanted to recombine and build on 43 and 44, or not recombine, can he build on 43 and 44 together? Would we allow that?
Under the current ownership,
Not at the current. If he only owned 2 lots, I'm thinking about somebody that owns 2 lots, both of them are non-conforming. When you recombine them, they're still non-conforming. It's
Yes,
still
yes.
non-conforming.
so let's say you
You
have,
can't.
a
Okay.
typical situation is you have a house that sits on 2 lots and somebody wants to put in a pool.
Mhm.
Then that before they get the building permit, they're supposed to recombine. those lots. And in some cases, that lot, that combined lot is still non-conforming, whether it's lot size or lot width.
Right, okay.
But it still reduces the number of lots.
We're trying to prevent the requirement or stop the requirement that would make them combine and include an existing property, an existing house, I'm sorry, an existing residence, right?
I don't follow your question.
We're, under the current ordinance, this person would have to combine all three of them.
If he wanted to build on lots 43 and 44,
He would
yes,
combine all three of them
yes,
and then be subject to all of the maximums,
Yes.
setbacks, and those kinds of things that we have in place.
correct.
But that was your interpretation that Mr. Varnell didn't care for, right?
That was appealed.
That's why Mr. Varnell's sitting in the third row. But what I would like to kind of run by Johnny is the obvious intent. The first one scenario that I've got is, number one, is develop lots 44 and 43 as one per parcel and hold lot 45, the owner. That's our objective with this ZTA, correct?
That's right.
And then number two scenario would be develop lots 44 and 43 as one parcel and sell lot 45. Where do we fall in this ZTA?
I think
That
the
situation.
exact same situation as number one.
Yeah, that would be,
Permitted.
that would be one, he could hold it or he could sell it
That's right.
individually
Or remodel,
and
or
remodel.
rebuild. the
Right,
house.
yeah. That's another scenario. So my number three scenario is sell lots 44 and 43 as one parcel and hold lot 45. Which is certainly a scenario that could happen.
I think in that case, they'd have to do a recombination prior to sale.
If you sold lot 44 and 43 together as one parcel and hold lot 45, it would qualify for a recombination
I believe
on all
so.
three lots?
Assuming 44 and 43 are vacant.
Right.
Yes.
Mhm.
Based on the last sentence that was added under that standalone paragraph after subsection 1, the last sentence, it says recombination shall be required as provided in subsection 2 below in the event that the applicable lots remain vacant at the time of such sale.
Okay, now, sell lot 45. Lots 44 and 43 remained undeveloped and held by the owner.
Same situation.
Okay.
Assuming 43 and 44 are not built on, they're vacant.
Redevelop lot 45, which would be remodel or tear down or rebuild, or even so much as building a deck on the back that needed a building permit. So we redevelop lot 45 and hold lots 44 and 43, which is basically what the scenario was for 1 and 2 that I just gave you. So,
Same thing.
Same thing.
Yeah.
Again, assuming they're vacant, 43 and 44.
mhm. I think what we're not up against, but what we're trying to do is make it work for the new owner and, be a good steward to our land by trying not to put two smaller houses on, 2 50-foot lots. It's a lot of hoops to jump through in order to do that, but it may be feasible. Who knows? That would be a lot of attorney time, and I'm not sure if we won, what the outcome would be would something we'd be proud of. I don't know. Anybody?
The individual could sell any one of those lots, sell lot 44.
What's that?
The individual who owns all three could sell lot 44 to you if you wanted to buy it. And then you would have a non-conforming lot, wouldn't you?
So you're
And
certain
you
of
wouldn't
that?
own anything adjacent, would you? And you could build yourself a little cabin.
Well, that's what Casey maintains, that we could pull one lot out.
And I don't think that's what anybody really wants. I think 43, combining 43 and allowing them to combine 43 and 44 without 45.
No,
Makes
there's
perfect sense.
there's no combination going on here. Right?
We would treat 43 and 44 as a single development. site.
Correct. But
Not
it wouldn't,
require recombination.
They would
No.
not be required to recombine if they're doing a single-family dwelling and customary accessory building.
Why is that? Why are we not requiring them to recombine?
because they'd have to recombine the whole parcel into one.
Not if we say that they can recombine two. We can recombine two parcels that are non-conforming into another one that is non-conforming. Why can't we do that?
It was attempted in the first
Yeah.
draft, and it's been difficult to get that to work, to be very honest with you.
I get it.
I'll be
Yeah,
real,
this one's.
I'll be
crazy enough.
real honest. This is a very good compromise for both the town and the owner, I think. And that's what our duty is as a planning board is to be fair and reasonable in situations like this, because this is not the last one that we're going to see, folks. Another weird one will come along. I mean,
I would like to see them recombine because I think Ed's point is well taken. 20 years from now, if the house burns down or whatever, you still have two lots there. Or if somebody just decides, I don't like this house, and they tear it down, you still got two lots of record. They could sell one without the town.
but if there is a house straddling two lot lines,
Mhm.
if it burns down,
Well,
You still have two lots.
going past that though, let's say in your situation, let's say this is adopted, the owner develops lot 43 and 44 with a single family dwelling and a customary accessory building. Then say later on he wants to put a swimming pool on here. He would be required to recombine them then.
Really?
I believe
Why?
so. I believe so.
Okay, because of something else.
Because of 2C. Development is proposed of a new structure used to be located on two or more adjacent lots under the same ownership.
Suppose he puts a pool in with construction of the house.
That might be possible, but most likely he would have to develop it first. With a single family, the exemption allows a single family building, single family dwelling and customary accessory building. So if he wanted to do a pool, he most likely would have to get his CO first, then come back and do a pool.
But then he'd have to recombine.
But I believe he would have to recombine them then when he did the pool.
But at that point, at least the structure's already built.
Yes.
so if lot 45 sells and the two undeveloped lots are sitting there vacant, wouldn't they, at that point, wouldn't they immediately be subject to recombination to develop?
He would not, sale of lot 45 per the proposed language should not take place without recombination prior to sale. That's what this proposed language says. Lots 43 and 44 cannot be sold if they're vacant,
Mm-hmm. Right, according to the language. in
according to the
CPA.
proposed language.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think the language is meeting what we want to do. I mean, anybody have a different
No.
spin on it? I think we've covered the scenarios on how it would go. There may be one more in there. I only had 5.
Well, I think, as we've spent some time talking about enforceability and the legislation that kind of ties our hands from making this more strict than it is currently,
Mhm.
I think we can come back and revisit that when we have that ability.
Anybody? I'm satisfied with the answers that we've got from Mr. Varnell and Mr. Hollow. Any more questions of Wes or those two attorneys? Anybody? I just know that when I started down this road in 2018, we ran into a lot of different, rabbit holes trying to figure out how we could keep the density in check on multiple small lots. And Ben Gallup did a lot of work to get us to where we're at today. And like Wes said, he told us, and remember it, he said, you're going to see more. This is a guarantee. That's the only guarantee I can make is you will see more. But in 5 years, this isn't bad.
So is there a problem with just, if you have 2 lots, I don't care who is on each side of you. If I owned 5 lots, can I take 2 of them that were originally platted, each one is non-conforming, and I'm going to combine them, and it's still going to be non-conforming, and let me build on it? The town says no. The town says, no, you got to keep going and grab as many as you own until you make something conforming, right?
It depends on, I hate to say it this way, but it depends on circumstances. It depends on the ownership around it. It depends on
Depends on whether you
If
have
they're
one of these
developed-
exemptions.
if they're developed or not developed, yes.
Right.
Hmm.
I just don't understand why we can't say, if you have 2 originally platted lots, you can build on it, even if it's still non-conforming.
Point taken.
Anyway, it just seems a lot simpler than adjacent owning this. Do you own that? Who owns this? Like,
Well,
if you got 2, build on it.
this ZTA is basically a carve out for one property, just like the 5 original carve outs. I mean, like we even put a date on the 3 heirs. So it's complicated, yeah, but so is subdivision in Southern Shores.
It
So,
certainly is.
I think that Mr. Hollow and, in conjunction with Mr. Varnell has done a good job at getting us to this point. So I would be willing to entertain a motion to approve this ETA as written and discussed and send it to town council. Anybody want to make that motion? Anybody?
I just want to send it to town council. I don't want to approve it.
Well, we gotta, can't be
wanna
neutral on
recommend
that.
It's just too hard to understand.
Anybody?
that's all.
My discussion beforehand is just one thing. Why didn't he just combine the 2 lots if he's, it seems like everybody's jumping through hoops because he won't combine the lots.
Will he combine, if he
If combined to
Well,
has to combine 2, but our ordinance says he has to combine
3, yeah.
What's the link to 3? Just because it was originally
Because,
one-
no, because the 2, combining those 2 doesn't make it conforming.
Oh.
He has to get all 3 to make it conforming, if even then.
Can we send this to council without an approval?
I believe if you all,
No.
if you don't make a recommendation for or against, I think it is reported as for.
I'm gonna make the motion and ask for a second. And if we get a second, we're gonna vote on it and you can vote up or down. But, I'm gonna make the motion, or I move that we approve ZTA 2501 as written and discussed, and approve it to send to town council. That's my motion. Can I get a second?
Mighty quiet in here.
No second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Jane. Now, discussion. We've got a motion, we've got a second.
If the town attorney and staff agree that this is the most expeditious method of moving forward to allow this individual to build on those two lots, then I am in favor of it. I think it's much more, as I said before, I think it's more complicated. Our code is more complicated than it might need to be. And I would like for any individual that would combine two non-conforming lots and create a non-conforming lot to have that be a recombination. They should recombine those two before and be allowed to build. I mean, I'm not against what the individual's trying to do at all. I'm just, hamstrung by the language. I'm just a little dense, I guess, for the language, but I will support it because our town attorney recommends it and the staff recommends it. And I think it'll work in this one situation.
I think those are all really good points that you just raised, and I agree that it's a complicated ordinance, and I appreciate your guys' patience today and probably in the days leading up to this, reviewing it and hearing us out. I do think this is the most cost-effective and the most narrow way that we can move forward. I think our other option is probably to either see an attempt to build on lot 44 and then lot 43, or I think we're going to find ourselves in litigation over the appeal. And I feel pretty good about our chances on that appeal, but I'm not going to guarantee any results. No lawyer's ever going to do that. And just to get to that decision would cost an arm and a leg. But you have an ordinance, a pre-existing ordinance with very narrow exceptions, and this is an attempt to make one more narrow exception. And it's not perfect. It's still not going to be perfect. But as you guys said a minute ago, it took 5 years to get to this point. Hopefully now it'll take 10 years before this circles back around. So we're just trying to keep it as tight as we could. And it's the best thing that we came up with over the last couple of weeks.
Thank you. Anybody else have questions, doubts that they want addressed before we vote? Ed? Tony?
This is probably the most complicated ordinance I have read. Seriously, it says not in one line, then it says it's okay in the next line. It's extremely complicated. And I'm a firm believer in if any ordinance is written, a layman should be able to pick up that ordinance, read it, and understand it. I've read this thing, 10 times maybe. I read it right before I came, and it was like, what is it saying? So I have great problems with any ordinance that's written that a layman cannot understand. Okay, I do.
I agree with you 100% as well. I didn't draft the ordinance. I did draft the amendment. One thing I will say about the amendment is that I agree with you that your original ordinance is very difficult to understand, especially if you don't have a planning background, much less a legal background. I do hope, and I think, and I believe that the version of the ordinance we've come up with makes it a little bit more clear. Adding the language single, adding the language adjacent in some areas. There were certain things that we did to tighten this up just a little bit more to try to make it a little bit more clear without defeating the purpose of the ordinance. But I agree with you, it's complicated. Town code's full of complicated ordinances.
I'll give you a quick example of what I'm saying for future reference. 36-132A, B, A and B. A says the single lot is not under the same ownership as the adjacent lot. Then B says that it has to be, is located adjacent to a single conforming lot under the same ownership. So A says not under the same ownership. B says under the same ownership. It is for somebody to, I gave it to my wife to read. And she goes, what are they saying? And she says, it says not, and then it says has to be. And that's where the confusion comes in.
I agree with you, and I think, and Mr. Haskett might be able to chime in on this, maybe. But I think the reason that some of these, like if you look at subsection A1A and B, like you were just talking about, even C through E, I think the reason that those do have to be so detailed and narrow is because my guess is that the drafter of this ordinance originally tried to make as tight of exceptions as he could.
Yes, believe me.
Yeah.
What he's done is considerably easier to follow than what Ben Gallup did at the beginning of all this. I mean, there was some stuff, I was like you, I was reading it multiple times, put it aside for a couple of days, come back and going, what the hell is he talking about? But to answer your question, in those exceptions, because I got them right here from 7 or 8 years ago, there was a freestanding lot involved where the single lot is not under the same ownership as the adjacent lot. There was a freestanding lot that we accepted, that we knew about. And then the other one was down on Sea Oaks Trail, Mr. Hurd. You remember Mr. Hurd? And that's there. I could, or you, Wes could show you exactly what each one of those are. And they had to have those words in there to make sense of what we were doing as his, newness comes in play. So, yeah, it's hard to keep up. I'm no attorney, but I know one.
Yeah, and I would just say from staff's perspective, it is complicated, it is difficult, and if somebody calls and I start looking into a property, first thing I'll start with is I'll look at 2, is it A, B, C, or D? Then I'll look at 1, and then I'll say, is it A, B, C, or D there?
Yeah.
And currently in A1, the way to look at it is A1, those are exemptions. And A, B, C, and D, or A, B, and C rather, they address very narrowly, very specific situations. D, it actually ended up applying to many different, or I would say several different properties, owners. But it is a type of situation. But the reason it is complicated is because it had to be, like Mr. Hollow said, it had to be narrow, specific, so as to not create any unintended consequences.
Jan,
Yes.
do you have any questions of the staff before we vote on this? Okay. All right, we have a motion and a second on the floor. All in favor of the motion, raise their hand, say aye. Aye.
Reluctantly.
4.5.
Yeah.
So unanimous 5-0, or maybe 4.5 to 0.
Yeah.
And to be clear, I'm voting for the intent in the first place.
Yeah.
And secondly, I'm voting to move it to the council and let
Yeah,
them
exactly.
They're the ones who were elected.
Yeah, well, we are only making a recommendation.
We know that.
Okay, Ms. Schertzman? Oh, Casey, do you?
I do not, I was saying thank you.
Okay.
I'm gonna get the heck out of here. Billing, but no, thank you guys, I appreciate it.
Thank you. All right, public comment number 2. 3 minutes as well.
Okay,
getting
I
sleepy.
would like to say a word about 36-132A2C, which has been alluded to and does require recombination simply when you propose to put a new structure on the property. Wes mentioned a swimming pool. Well, I have relatives who, just to get their building permits to put a back deck on a house that was built in 1981 and a staircase on another house built in 1999, they had to recombine. So they had to pay $1,500 to get a survey done. They had to hold off on their plans with their contractor while they waited to get the survey done and then file for the recombination. And then eventually they were able to go ahead with the work that was done. Now, to me, this is unfair. This is not the way things should be handled. And and they did it. They complied. They didn't go to an attorney and seek a way to appeal. And they also did, this is a section that I don't think actually goes to the heart of the ordinance, which is to try to preserve low-density housing, open space. If you're just replacing a deck that has worn out and you're not doing anything more than that, or a staircase, or maybe you're doing a bathroom in your house, you're remodeling, and why are you being compelled to recombine? It's a financial hardship. It may not have been at one time, but it is now. So I would ask you to take another look at 36-132A2C and consider revising it or eliminating it. Maybe it's just in the instance of a swimming pool, because that might lend itself to a problem with density that didn't exist before. But when you're just trying to improve your property and you've got a contractor who wants a permit, and now you're being told you have to recombine, it's onerous, I think. I also, going back to what you all discussed here, not everybody thought this was the way to go 5 years ago. Not everybody, there was talk about doing different districting. Chris Nason had ideas. Jim Connors had ideas. People on the town council. It wasn't 100% in this direction of exemptions. So you can look at it again. My only other thought is, why could you not force recombination of 43 and 44 and give a variance for 45 and not touch this ordinance at all? Why couldn't you just settle this dispute through a variance? Thank you.
And you can stay up there for a minute. I do have a couple of questions, because I think that you need to take your concerns about what your family has just experienced to town council.
I will.
Yeah.
I absolutely will.
But I do have, because I looked up, I'm familiar with where those properties are. And, your family owns quite a few properties in Southern Shores. I know the blue one is a rental. Is the other one a rental as well?
Yes, they're all rentals,
Okay.
except for over in the Dogwood Trail.
At 146, that's the blue one, right?
Yes.
That's a single lot, isn't it? Lot 2H?
Well,
Did you
you
have to
can
get
ask
that-
Wes about that.
Did you have to get that recombined?
Yes. And it's an interesting piece of history, Andy. When my father did the deal on that, it was a single lot, 10,920 square feet. And then he was notified by Southern Shores Realty that there was another section of property that he could get through quick claim.
You had that written in your.
Yeah, so it started out as a single lot, Lot H, And then later on, he learned that he could get an additional piece.
Right.
So now it's about 14,000 square feet.
So
Now,
that had to be recombined.
yes. That's the decision that Wes made.
Well.
Now,
and-
I didn't have anything to do with it.
Right.
I would have argued that it was
But
only one
that-
lot.
They're all rental properties.
Yes,
Well, I don't mean to sound cold, but I've had to do the same thing with some of my families and recombined over minor additions and stuff. And it's a cost of doing business sometimes. And, you know, the ordinance from A to E now, they're all triggered by a building permit, every single one of them, including, so when you, and I don't know, I don't have any solution on how we can kind of separate a big building permit from a little building permit.
well,
And that's the issue that you're having. Everything else from B down is a major building permit. But do we put a dollar amount on it? Do we put, I don't know.
well, I think
that's-
that's worth discussing.
Yeah.
Yeah,
sure.
I just think it's onerous when all you're trying to do is repair your stairs to make them safe,
But
that
the
you're
building permit, the development permit triggers it.
correct.
Yeah. And
And yet we have these two lots and they didn't trigger the recombination. You know, I mean, it's an issue of equity.
well, I would certainly address the town and, you know, if you want to take a stab at, you know, putting some language in there that would be a ZTA that would replace, you know,
Maybe
the current
the
language that we
verbiage
have.
should be in the same footprint. In other words, if you do not exceed this,
Yeah,
the same
That would be
footprint.
it.
That's an idea that I've thought of.
Yeah.
That if all you're doing is replacing,
Mhm.
Exactly,
Right,
putting it
and-
back in
Yeah.
the same
The-
footprint, you're not exceeding.
The money value would be harder to keep up with because, you know, inflation
But if you're not,
Yeah.
changing the footprint of the property,
and.
then why would you have to be forced to recombine?
Yeah.
that's one approach. I just think it should be considered.
Oh,
You know,
absolutely.
and,
Yeah,
and
I
that
have no
there's,
problem with it.
as Bobby Outen says, I don't have any skin in the game, but I think that other people,
Yeah.
you know, will,
Mhm.
and they're going to be resistant to having to recombine for
Yeah.
such a small
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah,
So-
okay. Well, great.
Thank
Thank you.
you.
All right. Wes, do we have any? We got planning board comments? Robert? Ed?
Yeah, I do. I was looking at the schedule. And in April, it's April 20th maybe. And hold on, I was just going to pull it up. The plan,
April 21st.
April 21st. I'm not going to be here, I'll tell you that now. I'll be traveling, just arriving home. But that is the day after Easter. I don't know whether, it doesn't matter to me because I'm not going to be here for half of that week. But I just thought to get a quorum, it might be a tough time. It's just something to think about when you approach it, because I'm definitely not going to be here. Okay?
Yes, sir.
All right, thanks, Tony. Jane?
And I didn't know where to go with this, but I just thought I'd let you know, Wes, that at Christmas time, because of the bridge being closed and getting out of Chickahawk onto Ocean, there were like 6 cars because of the traffic of tourists at that time. And the light changed before even the 6 cars got through. So I think that light has to be monitored a little bit better in the sense of knowing that come summertime, if the bridge isn't open, like for Easter, which is April, when we get more people, that the people coming out of Chickahawk, they need to get through that light, so that light has to stay green longer on the Chickahawk side versus that side. And then several people have said to me that they've just gone through the light because it is just taking so long for it to change. You can't turn left, and they're just sitting there and sitting there and sitting there, and there's no one coming from either direction, and they're just going through it. So maybe we could do something to get.
I just, if I could, just wanted to address that. The traffic engineers for DOT were notified of exactly what you just said last week, and they supposedly made some adjustments. So I'd ask y'all to see if that's any better.
Because I'm in and out of there. I did mention it to Elizabeth.
Yeah.
Because our first meeting was postponed, and I said, oh my, because I was going to bring it up. And I said, good.
I know they did something because they were flashing on Saturday.
Oh,
So
was that good?
maybe.
I think they were completely out yesterday for one time when I went through there. That'd be even better.
Well, yeah, they got
Okay.
that bright speed that's kind of tormenting everybody.
Announcements, Wes?
The next regular meeting is scheduled for February 19th. Don't have anything at the moment, but something may be available for that agenda. I'll keep you posted.
All righty then. Well, I'm going to make a motion that we adjourn. Could I get a second?
That one you'll get a second for.
Ed, seconds, beat you to it. All right. Thank y'all.
Thank you.